Now, before we do this practice, I want to share a story. It's a very famous story from the Buddha's life. It comes from the day in which he became awakened, when he became a Buddha, which means awakened one. At this point in the Buddha's life, he was not the Buddha. He was a prince named Siddhartha Gautama, who left his kingdom, left his clansmen, the Sakyan clan in India, about 2,600 years ago. And he sort of gave up his princely possessions and went into the forest looking for freedom, looking for enlightenment. And somewhere along the way, he started engaging in these practices that were very harsh. It's sort of like self-mortification. Essentially, he was starving himself, and he was practicing pain as a practice, as a base. So in India at the time, many yogis were trying this, and their theory was that when you feel pain all the time, but you allow it, that may lead to enlightenment, because pleasure didn't seem to go there. And Siddhartha, who knows why he engaged in this, but it may have been because he was a prince with all the princely pleasures. He had, 3 different palaces for each season in India. He had pretty much anything you could ever ask for as a human being. He was just living a life steeped with sensual pleasure, and he was a very successful and sort of well thought of prince. He had praise, he had prestige. That didn't get him to enlightenment. So he spent 6 years practicing these really horrific sort of things, and the main thing that comes to mind is starvation. It's said that he became so thin that if you touched his belly, you could feel his backbone. So really just hanging on to the edges of life. And I think it's possible as well that for a yogi who's quite advanced in meditation, you can probably sustain life in this sort of position for quite some time. So he's practicing, and he has a memory. It's a memory of a time when he was a child, a very young child, and he was sitting under a rose apple tree in his kingdom, in his sort of father's backyard. And his father was plowing the fields, and he was sitting there with a bunch of the women who helped raise him. The Buddha's mother actually passed away when he was young, so he was raised by, a collection of servants and women. If you can imagine this, right, on maybe a cool summer's day, sitting in the shade of a tree as a child, knowing your father is close, doing work on the field, being surrounded by those who love you. It's a beautiful scene. It's a scene of safety. There are several mothers on this call right now. You can imagine how nice it feels when your child is sitting outside in nature, surrounded by loved ones. And so when Siddhartha was in this position, he spontaneously went to the first jhana, a beautiful, pleasurable state of mind in which one feels unified, one is collected, all your resources are there, you feel strong. But in particular, what stands out in the mind is this quality called piti, physical bliss, rapture, this tingliness in the body. So the Buddha, while he's starving himself, has this memory, and he realizes that this thing that he experienced is blameless. It wasn't something to be feared or blamed. He realizes that it's humane, it's pure. And probably he saw that it was something innate. As a child, I think most people, when they hear the story, they think, oh, wow, the Buddha was so amazing as a child. He went to the first jhana, this state that is only for the best monks or yogis in the world who spent hours and hours in meditation. But the Buddha didn't say that. I don't take it to suggest that at all. In fact, quite the opposite. For me, this makes me realize that this stage called the first jhana and this territory of samadhi is something that's innate. It's waiting to be found within us. In fact, a child can find it. It's so closely connected to what it means to be human that a child can find it. So the Buddha actually decides that he's going to stop practicing pain because he senses the purity and the blamelessness of this pleasure. And when he makes this decision, something clicks, and he just sort of knows, he has a real conviction that he's found the path to peace. So he stirs up determination, and he actually says that he's not going to move until he finds nibbana, or nirvana, what's called enlightenment, because he senses that he's close. And so he enters into this path of pleasure in the path of the jhanas or samadhi, and he becomes fully awakened. And the Buddha actually says, he says, I teach pleasure. I teach pleasure. And this is really important for us to remember as meditators. Most of us, when we sit down to meditate, we don't experience pleasure. And when I say most of us, I'm referring to, I would say, how most people conceptualize meditation. If you're seeking focus and concentration and you're trying to make your mind rigid and one-pointed, I mean, does any of that sound pleasurable? You might find sort of a back door to pleasure that way, but it's good for us to know that what we're doing is something that a child could do. It's something that should be pleasurable, immensely pleasurable.